And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I'm Sarah Burr.
And I'm J.C. Kenney, and I tell you what, we got a great show for you today, folks. We're going to take a trip in the Wayback Machine and do a little fantasy fun. So, Sarah, I think it's time to get bookish.
Yes, sir. My favorite thing to be. And as JC mentioned today, we're mixing history, we're mixing fantasy, we're mixing steampunk, mixing mystery. We've got such a great collection
Yeah.
of themes and topics to dive into today. So we're very honored to be able to share a moment with our guest, Lou Kemp. Lou, welcome to the show.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
We're very much looking forward to learning more about you and your work, as well as our wonderful audience members. So, by way of introduction, any chance you can share a little bit about your background, maybe what you were doing prior to writing, or what kind of drew you into creating stories in the first place?
It started when I was 8 years old, seriously. And I told my first story when I started taking it seriously when I was 19 to a small
Wow.
press at the time. This is way
Nice.
long ago, way, way long ago. And back when you had to mail in all of your copies, times whatever place you're sending it to. And I did a lot of various things, had an agent at one point, did a couple books, which is all in the mystery vein. Then I joined the horror writers, tucked that into it a little bit, did a few other things, and then I went back to the mystery writers and got into their yearly anthology. What they do is they have a big name editor, and about half of the anthology stories are by name authors. And then they save it for a few for other people, and then about 3 or 4 of them are newbies. So I got into several of those, and then back when Charlene Harris had the editing duties, this would be about 10, 12 years ago, the story that I put in for that was the beginning of the Selwyn series. And then I got in another one for the one more recent one that Ann Perry did and continued it. And the first 15 pages of book one is that one story.
Oh, wow.
That is so cool. You've teed it up for us for my next question. But before we get that, easy for me to say, let's rewind. Before I get to my question, I do want to say a quick shout out to Farmhouse Reader and DHB checking in with us online. So, hi, folks. Great to have you with us. Lou, you mentioned the Selwyn series. This is your current series of books that you have out, up to 6 of them now. Can you tell us a little bit about the series, some of the main characters, and give us a feel for what this fantastic world that you created is?
Thank you. All right. Jonas Selwyn, is a very playful, immortal magician who meets up with a very serious and grouchy automat who is also an atomic scientist. And they're on a ship heading from San Francisco towards Singapore, and the automat's evil brother had paid Selwyn to kidnap him and take him to Johnston Island. And throughout the whole thing, Selwyn figures out that he's been made a fool out of, and the evil brother eventually meets his end. And when they hit Singapore, they also inherit a rich heiress who doesn't want to get married to somebody there. And they head off going toward India on a train, where they meet the third main character, Bartholomew, who is a widower from the Sudan. He's 7 feet tall, super superstitious to his core. And the first time he sees Selwyn do something magical, he about dies through the whole thing. But anyway, actually, the first thing he saw was Selwyn throwing a vampire off the train, petticoats and all. She fell down the hill. And he said, "Don't worry about it. By the time she gets up, we'll be in a couple more cities up." So anyway, it goes on from there. They add more characters to the main ones. And then into book two, when they go back towards Singapore to pick up the automat, Professor Kang's wife, and bring her back to Prague, that's when they meet up with Captain Nemo when he and his ship had kidnapped her to make Kang follow them. It's a long story. to do something for them. And Selwyn won't put up with it, and he eventually stops the Nautilus in its tracks with his magic and takes them on. They get to be finding out what's really going on, and they're all friends. The bad guy dies because they all moved to prison. Anyway, getting back to trying not to skip through too much. So from book 2 through book 5, it's a series of adventures with Nemo pretty much at the helm. And when they're in Prague, he's on land and he still maintains. There's a lot of, it's a part mystery, a lot of bits and pieces of other things involved. But when you get to the book 5, it's an extremely involved book. It takes on the slave trade that was happening with a group of pirates. They end up back into Singapore eventually. And I don't want to try to give too much away, but make too much things too confusing. But basically, he's a part of the ship. They are, and they're not really wanting to get off of it. But while they are in Singapore, his wife is murdered in Prague by other Ottomans. And they don't know it the whole time, but the reader knows it the whole time, and how everyone's dealing with it. And then book 6, which is Swango, takes everything in a new and more interesting direction. I won't say exactly what it is, but if somebody really wants to know, they can get a hold of me and I'll tell them. And book 7 is entitled, which should give you a hint, Lucky and Mrs. Nemo. And Mrs. Nemo was, in my mind, a real thing. Lucky is a new scientist they add to their island where they're building a flying machine. It goes on. There's a lot of elements involved, but I also have a cast list at the beginning, so to make sure everybody knows who everybody is. Does that answer your question pretty much? Or?
Oh,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I
absolutely.
found that cast of characters to be very helpful because number one, it really kind of frames for you that we're dealing with some people characters. Jules Verne is one of them that we're familiar with in this historical context. But I have to ask, how did a short story, this 15-page short story that you wrote, turn into this huge world that you've created? And how did you meet Selwyn to begin with? Like, how did that character introduce themselves to you? How did he, this immortal magician, like, where did he come from?
I invented him to fit the situation for the Charlene Harris edited anthology. And if you know Charlene Harris, she has the vampire series and a few other series and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was tailoring the whole thing to being her idea of a mystery has other elements. And so I invented him. And while I was inventing him, I thought, oh, he's got a lot of potential. And then when I did the second one, I brought him back. And that's where we're having the violins played before Jonestown. And throughout the whole series, Selwyn depends on music for his magic. And when the violins show up, something's going to happen. And so the violins played before Jonestown. That's how it started.
That's fascinating. That really is, and which makes me wonder. One of the things I've read a lot of fantasy throughout the years, and loved the way so much of it is the authors make stuff up literally out of whole cloth. It's like, okay, this is my whole new world. I'm thinking like Tolkien or folks like that. What you've done is you've got this fantasy world set 150 years ago, but it's on real, it's here on Earth. We're going to places like Singapore, Prague, what was it like taking this fantasy world and putting it into this real life historical context? Because I think that's something that's really unique and really fun to read.
I like doing that. And to do it, I made sure of the historical eras I wanted to go into. And I'll give an example. Selwyn has a very interesting half-brother a little bit older than he is, that is, his name is Pelez, and he's a magician, he's immortal, and he's also half evil half the time. And he's very playful, even worse than Selwyn is. And so they ran into each other and they were catching up, so to speak, in between things that were happening. And Pelez said, "Don't you remember the last time we saw you was at the beheading of one of the queens, Kenney?" And oh yeah, they didn't get it right the first time, did they? So that kind of a thing went on. But I also interspersed the history as a useful plot enhancing tool. And what I'm doing as far as Pelez goes, he has this one. Pelez is complete enemies with the head of the Palermo vampire family. And I do not have any gore from the vampires, but I have plenty of suggestible things that go on. As an example, when they hit the beach at an island above Singapore, he's riding a giant tiger, the vampire, the head of the family, and screaming at the pirates. And the tiger is Selwyn. So they're having a good old time. So then when Selwyn decides he had to do something else, he disappeared on him and he landed in the sand, pissed off. But it just, in general, everything moves fast. And I'm just very happy at my age that my imagination is holding it.
Now, how do you, because you have so many moving parts and pieces, how do you like storyboard this series? Is it something you don't?
I'm a pantster, which is, as you probably know, is flying by the seat of my pants, making it up as I go, which I think enhances my imagination. But twice over the last 6 books, I wrote myself into a corner and had to back up and tear things up and start over on a certain area because I wrote myself into a corner. And I will make notes in the margins of when I'm doing the first draft, like don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. But there's no purpose or anything else. I let the story lead it and the characters lead. As an example, in book number 3, which is The Raven and the Pig, Selwyn has just been saved on Thales Island, and they notice there's somebody watching them. And then when they get to Palermo, before they're going into the catacombs, they're approached by the vampires, which is the head of the family, and 2 very beautiful vampire women. One of whom becomes Selwyn's love interest for the next 4 or 5 books. Okay. The whole thing is a big setup as far as I'm concerned, because as soon as I thought of doing this, something else immediately fell into place. And so I'm still a confirmed pantster. I don't have index cards, I don't have anything.
Well, what I think is so cool about that, it just goes to show once again that, we all have our own processes and they work for us. And I just think, I tip my hat to you because, well, I have to plot or else I'm going to end up, running into roadblocks and all kinds of stuff. So, so tell us a little bit about, if you would, I guess, can you describe when you mention that Professor Kang is an automat? That makes me think, my mind immediately goes to automaton, a robot, some sort of artificial intelligence type of thing. So can you talk to us, especially not only because Professor Kang is not just a regular human, he's also kind of Selwyn's sidekick partner in these adventures. So can you talk to us a little bit about the good professor?
The good professor is diminutive. He has leathery skin, and he is very mechanical, but he also has feelings. And so when he first met on the ship, Selwyn, and they were discussing things, he made a point saying, and I do have my feelings, and I love my wife, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Kang is also the biggest nag in Selwyn's side because he nags him constantly. And then it's a funny back and forth banter. And Bartholomew stays outside of it, but usually sides with Kang when he's getting nagged. He doesn't side with Selwyn, but he'll stick up for him if he needs to. But what they're actually, the 2 of them are worrying about right now, which is Selwyn and Kang, and they're going to drag Neil into it, is they don't want to lose Bartholomew because he is mortal. They want to make him immortal. And one of the suggestions was to let him become a vampire, so to speak, because they are nice vampires. In fact, the girlfriend of Selwyn's a good example. But they know how superstitious he is. He would never agree to it outright, probably. So it's a big debate going on about how to do that, which brings up the subject, why not make me immortal too? So it's just something that's going on.
I got the sense, and especially as we're talking about Professor Kang, that it's a Data meets C3PO type of character personality. Yeah, there's it's the cast that you've assembled is just so. I mean, there's so much for every, I think, type of fantasy lover in these books. I'm really curious about, and JC, you kind of alluded to this earlier, with the setting being a historical yet fantasy part of our world. What made you choose places like Singapore and Prague that you wanted this action to take place in?
As far as Singapore itself goes, it was where the ship was heading after they entered a Arctic storm where they were attacked by Kang's brother and a bunch of Ottomans. And so basically, Selwyn froze them in the ice, blew up their ships, did a bunch of things to them. And so they just kept on going to Singapore. And when they were in Singapore, they were framed for murder. There is a mystery that runs through the whole thing. They were framed for murder, got away from the whole thing, excuse me, and took a train, several trains like the Orient Express going backwards. Okay. And then Selwyn built their train from a derelict into something much better. And that train still exists in the story. That's how they get to and from Prague to the seacoast. It is about a 4-hour train ride from them. So getting back to, I forgot part of the question, but basically, Prague is very important to me just because it fascinates me. It has a rich history of a lot of fantastical elements. The golem was in Prague, a bunch of other things. And it's a very colorful history for what I needed it to be. And the head witches coven, the coven of the witches in Prague, the lady that runs it, the witch that runs it, is really irritated at Selwyn from past experiences, but she was very useful to it in book 1 and 2. So it comes and goes. And then she crashes the wedding of their heiress ward, who marries someone that they found on the trips and is in Prague. She crashes a wedding and the whole thing gets really interesting. Just in general, I just love to mix it all up. Mm-hmm. And there is less romance in some of the books than others. I would say if you had to pick one genre, it would be adventure and the steampunk. And the flying machine becomes a really big deal to everybody. I have them on a mountaintop in Turkey with a city of children. It's a fable that I invented, and I made it real. It goes, there's a lot of elements that are involved. And back when I had an agent, and I had something not even nearly as involved with that many genres as all that, 2 or 3 genres even, I got told time and time again by the big publishers that literally, when you can stick to one genre, come back and see us. And that was about 25, 30 years ago. So nowadays, it's okay.
Well, and I think that's another great lesson that we all can take from you, Lou, is that today's publishing world, we don't have to allow ourselves to be shackled by big publishing's rules. That there's a place for all writers who write all kinds of things and mix up all kinds of things. And I just think this is so much fun. And I want to take a second to shout out Fashionable Bookworm, who's also joining us. So thank you for doing that. We've got about 10 minutes left, folks. So if you got questions, for Lou, be sure to drop them in the chat. And one question that I have is kind of going back to Selwyn. He's immortal. How does he not just get bored with his existence. For folks that maybe, because I think that's one of the things we see a lot of that, like in the vampire stories where vampires get certain, like thousands of years old and they're just over it all. So what keeps Selwyn invested in these adventures and in the world?
Okay. When he left San Francisco, he was bored. And that's why he took up Kang's brother on his offer. Oh, yeah, I'll give you whatever, whatever. And then by the time he got to Singapore, Selwyn was invested in Kang and in the whole thing, and his interest in everything had re-sparked. And then as he went along with Bartholomew, it got even better. When they got to Prague, he wasn't bored, but when they did meet up with Nemo, and from that point forward, he is a good friend of Nemo's. Even after he put a snake around his throat and hung him from the ceiling, he still a friend of Nemo's afterwards. And then when Nemo and Mrs. Kang fell in an underground lake, in a volcanic lake where he marks the novels, when they fell in and this giant whale shark went for them and he got them out, that's when he went into, which is I mentioned before, he can go into anybody's mind he wants to. He went into Nemo's mind, silently asked him a bunch of questions about other things, and knew that Nemo is very, very good. He's just as good as he is almost as superstitious as Bartholomew. So when he's done some very strange things, Nemo, for what he gets out of the whole thing and the whole trade-off, he goes along with most of it, but he sometimes tells him to stop. And it gets interesting. But Pelez is everybody's enemy off and on for different things, and then Pelez saves them. So it just goes on from there.
Let's talk a little bit, Lou, about your writing day itself. I'm always curious how, how different authors work, because we all have our own processes, and somebody can like sit down and in 30 minutes they can write 2,500 words, and others it takes you sit down for 8 hours and you get 600 words out. So I'm curious, like what for you is a successful day of writing, or what are your goals when you are in the middle of a manuscript, and trying to get to the end?
Okay. So in the beginning, a first draft for me has to be a really good fountain pen with a very thin nib, black ink, by hand writing the whole thing out.
Oh, wow.
And then I get it in the computer and scream at the voice activated software through the whole thing. Get it in the computer. So there's two answers to your question. If I'm creating, which I can't do on my computer, I can edit, I can add a little bit things here and there, but basic creating is not done normally. Okay. The editing stage, when I'm in full-blown editing stage, I can do 2 to 4 hours a day and still be good at it. And I usually work until 5 o'clock at night, no matter what time I start. And then I just turn it all off. And when I'm writing, literally writing it out the first draft, I'm in between your two examples. I do not clean up grammar or anything else. I get the basics down with some basic details, and sometimes really detailed details. And then a lot of notes on the margin, like change that, do this, sort of that, oh, you repeated that, kind of thing. But I would say once I'm in the computer editing mode, it's more rote by rote, and then I have a list of words that I run through to see how many times I repeated it and change them. For some reason, I have an affection for the word more. Don't ask me more. But I have to keep changing a lot of them. You just don't put that many mores in this manuscript. But as far as time goes, I would say I'm very average on output. I was on a river cruise here a couple of springs ago, hand wrote out book number 7 or 6. Came home and lost 100 pages of my handwritten first draft. Couldn't find it. Kept mentioning it in my newsletter. Couldn't find it. Just couldn't find it to save me. Then I found it. Then I'd already changed the direction of the whole thing. So, what can you say?
Man, well, so and that kind of leads to my question: is you've been doing this for a long time, and you've crossed genres, you've mashed up genres, you've written short stories, you've written full-length novels. What words of advice or guidance would you give to folks who are starting out, because you've seen it all?
I would say I wasted many years when I was starting out in my teens, especially, too timid to show it to anybody. And at the point at which, and this means don't show it to your friends and family, they're just going to pat you like this and go, isn't that nice? No, you find someone that is, will not be intimidated by knowing you at all. But I used to go to a lot of writers' conferences, get up and read my work, listen to all the criticisms or the ideas or whatever went on. And that was a really good turning point. I won in 1994, the second year I went to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference in California, the Fantasy Horror Sci-Fi Award. And I can't tell you a lot about it other than I still have that story. I published it in a small press. I read it a few conferences later and stunned the room because I think it really turned out well. But anyway, I would say definitely short stories is a great way to start because you get discouraged if you put your time and effort into a giant book and you haven't set it up right, or you don't have enough knowledge behind it, or you don't have enough people giving you hints and help behind you. And then reading what you like is good, but I don't think it's the only thing. I used to only write mysteries. And then when I started writing things with mystery elements with other things blossom. So don't limit yourself. Do what you want. Even if it doesn't fit anything, do what you want.
I think that's great advice, especially getting
Yeah.
feedback from other writers. I can't think how many times I had my wonderful family telling me like, "Oh my gosh, Sarah, I can't believe this," and then I would go to somebody like a college professor or what have you, and they'd be like, "What do you like? Do you know how to put a sentence together?" So getting that criticism is extremely important, but also having a good support system cheering you on is very, very helpful. In our final moments together, Lou, I'm hoping that you can tell our audience members where they can connect with you. How do they find out what's going on in your journey? How do they sign up for your newsletter? What's the best way to stay in touch with you?
Okay. Author Lou Kemp is the website.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be discouraged if Lou Kemp brings up something about fish, because Lou somebody is a fish manufacturer. So anyway, Lou Kemp, and maybe it's Lou Kemp is a fish. Anyway, and he was also a sidekick of Bob Dylan in the early days. But if
Oh,
you bring up
wow.
author Lou Kemp, not just Lou Kemp, you'll get to meet my newsletter and my website. But as far as Instagram and everything else goes, it's either going to be author Lou Kemp or Lou Kemp author. It's one of the two.
Okay, perfect. And in
Super.
our final moments together, we like to do our rapid fire round of what are we reading, watching, consuming, being entertained by. Any recommendations that you have for our audience members?
Totally. I am over the top, a new fan, fairly new fan, and I absorbed the first 24 books of Jodi Taylor in her time traveling series.
Ooh.
And then she has other smaller series that aren't time traveling. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just really great. And then St. Mary's, read them in order. That's her beginning of the time.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous.
Okay.
New
Yeah.
books to put to the list. JC, what about you?
Yeah.
Any
Um,
recommendations?
yeah, so I just finished listening to audiobook version of Dorothy L. Sayers' An Unnatural Death,
Mm.
and it was absolutely delightful. For those of you who aren't familiar, Dorothy L. Sayers was a contemporary of Agatha Christie, the Golden Age of Mystery, one of the absolute giants. And she has a wit in her storytelling that is just whip smart and is so much fun. And listening to the narrator was fantastic. So, if you get a chance, try out a Dorothy L. Sayers audiobook. It'll brighten your day.
All
How
right.
about you, Sarah?
I just started listening to 107 Days by VP Kamala Harris. I am listening to it on audiobook. I am completely engrossed. I'm just like, I got it delivered this morning on audiobook, and I'm already like halfway through. A
She
true,
did
like, just,
she did an interview with a View today about that.
yes,
And it
yes.
was great.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually watched that interview while I was eating my lunch. Yeah, it's just, it is an incredible piece of history that she's chronicled, and very candid. And I love it, and very much encourage people to read it if they'd like a little fire to be lit inside of them and a little hope to shine out. So that's my recommendation for today. Who knows what we'll have to recommend, JC, on Thursday when we have another moment with author
Yeah.
Elizabeth Mitchell. Our show is going to be airing at 4:30 Eastern on YouTube, and of course, for our Substack subscribers, you are getting our episodes ad free, and we also had a bunch of winners from our Bookish Hour giveaway. And I meant to write everybody's name down so that I could say their names on the stream. I know Susan Worrell was one of them. Sharon was one of them. Charlene was a winner. Sarah Fritchman was a winner, and there's one other person, and I apologize that I'm blanking on the name, but everybody should be getting their books delivered to them soon. So congratulations, you guys. And Lou, our time flew by. We told you it would go by very, very quickly. We really, really appreciate you stopping by and having a moment with us as we learn about your Selwyn series, about your writing career, and the wonderful advice that you've shared with us. So thank you so much for being here today.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And of course, to our wonderful viewers, we appreciate you being here live with us. And for those of you who are watching after the fact, we equally appreciate you. And we will see you at another show. So until then, stay bookish, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.